Hey guys, Chris here. In 1984, two young ladies were on this very trail and they had an encounter with something extremely frightening that followed them. We're going to be following their trail and telling that story. That's next. So our story takes place just outside of the small town here called Genoa, Nevada. And Genoa was established as a fort in 1851 on the east side of the Sierra Nevada here. And it was called the Mormon Station. Mormons had come here and settled. And this was also a rest stop on the California Trail, the Carson route. Also, Genoa is considered Nevada's oldest established non-native permanent settlement, 1851. So our story takes place in 1981, just outside of the small town of Genoa, Nevada. And Kelly and Linda were really good friends. They had just graduated from high school. Kelly was the funny one, really carefree. Linda was really logical and pretty serious, but they loved hiking together, and they loved to hike on this trail right behind me here. That day that they came here to this parking lot right here, there was one other car in the parking lot. It's a pretty strenuous hike, and they were really used to it, conditioned to it, and there's a lot of switchbacks going up. Their goal that day was to go about halfway up this trail, about an hour and a half, to an abandoned hunter's cabin. I don't know if it still exists up there. On the other side of this mountain here is Lake Tahoe. As they were hiking this route, about a third of the way up, they looked up and they heard and then saw two teenage boys running down a steep stretch, just like this one, and running for all they were worth, straight towards them. The two boys slowed down just enough to say, "Do not go up there. There's something very dangerous up there. It's a monster or something. Just go back." And then they turned and kept running. Right before they disappeared, one turned over and looked over his shoulder and said, "Do not go up there. It's not what you think it is." Both Kelly and Linda looked at each other and thought, it's a little strange. They kind of thought they were on drugs or something. They didn't know what was really going on. They didn't take it very seriously though. So they basically shrugged it off and continued on this trail here. It's a very nice trail. We're cutting deeper into the mountain here in this canyon. So they finally arrived at their destination. This old hunter's cabin is a place they like to go. Again, I don't know if that still exists on this trail. Linda pulled out her flute. She liked to play that in the wilderness. Kelly just listened, and they enjoyed a really nice view down into the Carson Valley behind me here. Hung out for about 45 minutes or so, and then decided it was time to turn back. But while they were up there, Kelly said she had this strange feeling of being watched. Also, they both smelled this really horrible smell. And it was so bad, Kelly checked her shoes twice because she thought she had stepped in something. At some point on their return route down this trail, they stopped along this creek right here. Not at this exact spot, but somewhere along this creek. And they were looking at pine cones for a project they were both working on. Linda was downhill looking up, and Kelly was uphill looking down back at Linda, and they're having this conversation. And then Linda turns her head and says, "Oh my God, it's a bear. It's a guy dressed like a bear. Oh my God." And Kelly turns and looks, and they're both looking up the slope, and they see this large 7-foot tall, 400 to 500 pound Sasquatch with this flat face, a very flat nose, and these large dark eyes. It was staring at them. They could see these large chest muscles, six-pack abs, these long arms hanging almost to the knees with gigantic hands and feet. Kelly said they're just staring at each other, not saying a word, the three of them, and Kelly said it was like something passed between them, something that they felt, some kind of a connection. Kelly said it was just a stone's throw away from them, 10, maybe 15 feet. And she also said it felt like this thing may have been there a lot longer than they thought, because it almost like just stepped out of the trees and revealed itself. She said the hair on it, not fur, but hair, was ruddy and rusty like the pine needles. She said it then turned and it went up the slope pretty rapidly, very agile, very powerful, very fluid-like, and it was silent, stepping on this steep slope with pine needles, not slipping at all. It did take its eyes off of them. It was looking over its shoulder while it went up this slope, and it took its arms when it was reaching and moving branches and tree boughs out of its way as it went up the slope and then disappeared. Kelly said later she remembered that this Sasquatch put its head back and took a big, almost like a sniff, like it was smelling them, and then it let out this huff sound, kind of a but really loud. Kelly was still standing there staring, frozen, just watching where this thing had just disappeared to. Linda grabbed her arm and started dragging her down the hill. We gotta go, we gotta go. They had about an hour to go to get back down to the trailhead and their car. After about 15 minutes, they noticed on one of these steep ridges above them, they saw the creature again. It was going in and out of the trees, and it was essentially paralleling them above them, following them down the trail. It was keeping some distance, and they were picking up their pace, moving as quickly as they could without running. They continued down the trail as quickly as they could. This thing was still paralleling them. For every switchback they would make, it would be just above them on the next one. They finally got back to the parking lot. This is the parking lot right here. They no longer use this as the parking lot. They want you to park out on the street there for this trailhead. And they said, Kelly and Linda, when they got back to their truck, they took a break and they looked up. They looked up this way, and they saw the creature crouched down on the horizon, watching them. Like it was curious, and they said, this thing was not threatening, and it seemed fascinated with them. And it had intelligent eyes, is what Kelly called it. And they had like empathy to the eyes because they saw it so close up, and that's what they experienced. So they left in the truck from this parking lot here, and they were gonna call the police or the rangers, or so they thought. And then they thought about it and they said, what are we gonna tell them? What are they gonna think? They're gonna think we're like out of our minds, and they're not gonna believe us. And so they just let it go because they were safe and they were gone. So years later, both Kelly and Linda still hiked this trail here up above town here, and they came back with their children after they got married and continued to hike this, and they called it Ape Canyon. The kids really liked that. They never had any other experiences, encounters, except one time there was a windstorm that happened one spring, and it knocked down several trees in an area, and it revealed this large boulder with these small trees around it. They went up to this area went through these small trees, and there was this little pocket next to the steep side of this boulder, and there was pine needles inside there that were like tramped down. And they thought this could have been a shelter for something, bear, deer, or Bigfoot. And it was situated where the wind would blow and the prevailing winds, and it seemed like a great shelter. They didn't know for sure, but they really thought that was interesting. Immediately after this encounter, within a day, Kelly did a drawing of what they saw, and they both agreed it was very similar in proportions and size to what they had experienced. Here's the drawing of it. Looks like it's done in colored pencil. Pretty well done. Kelly also had this to say about their experience. This is really interesting. I will never look at life on this earth the same way. I have seen Bigfoot, and not only does it make for a great tale around the campfires at night, it fuels my imagination about every little sound I hear when I am in the wilderness. I am intrigued. I only hope that no harm comes to the Bigfoots. I believe that the great creator of all life shares the sight of Bigfoot with people who might grow from the experience. I know Linda and I have both grown. Even if we share the experience with someone who does not believe us, it really does not matter. We know what we saw. He was so close in proximity, it was obvious to us that this fella belonged here. He was as natural as the sky, creek, trees, and the deer. Quite a story. All right, you guys. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. As always, keep hiking.